Darkness shrouded part of the crack, for in one place the tremors had collapsed a part of the wall against the other side, high up. He stared up at the blackness warily before hurrying underneath, but the slab of stone seemed to be solidly wedged in place. The itch had returned to the back of his head, stronger than before. No, burn me. No. It went away. When he came out above the camp, the bowl was filled with odd shadows from the sinking sun. Moiraine was standing outside her hut, peering up at the crack. He stopped short. She was a slender, dark-haired woman, no taller than his shoulder, and pretty, with the ageless quality of all Aes Sedai who had worked with the One Power for a time. He could not put any age at all to her. With her face too smooth for many years, and her dark eyes too wise for youth. Her dress of deep blue silk was disarrayed and dusty, and wisps stuck out in her usually well-ordered hair. A smudge of dust lay across her face. He dropped his eyes. She knew about him, she and Lan alone, of those in the camp. And he did not like the knowing in her face when she looked into his eyes. Yellow eyes. Someday, perhaps, he could bring himself to ask her what she knew. And Aes Sedai must know more of it than he did. But this was not the time. There never seemed to be a time. He didn't mean. It was an accident. An accident, she said in a flat voice, then shook her head and vanished back inside the hut. The door banged shut a little loudly. Perrin drew a deep breath and continued on down toward the cook fires. There would be another argument between Rand and the Aes Sedai. In the morning, if not tonight. Half a dozen trees lay toppled on the slopes of the bowl, roots ripped out of the earth in arcs of soil. A trail of scrapes and churned ground led down to the stream side, and a boulder that had not been there before. One of the huts up the opposite slope had collapsed in the tremors, and most of the Shinarans were gathered around it, rebuilding it. Loyal was with them. The Ogier could pick up a log it would take 4 men to lift. Uno's curses occasionally drifted down. Min stood by the fires, stirring a kettle with a disgruntled expression. There was a small bruise on her cheek, and a faint smell of burned stew hung in the air. "I hate cooking," she announced and peered doubtfully into the kettle. "If something goes wrong with it, it isn't my fault. Rand spilled half of it on the fire with his. What right does he have to bounce us around like sacks of grain?" She rubbed the seat of her breeches and winced. "When I get my hands on him, I'll thump him so he never forgets." She waved the wooden spoon at Perrin as if she intended to start the thumping with him. "Was anyone hurt?" "Only if you count bruises," Min said grimly. "They were upset all right at first. Then they saw Moiraine staring off toward Rand's hidey hole, and decided it was his work. If the dragon wants to shake the mountain down our heads, then the dragon must have a good reason for it. If he decided to make them take off their skins and dance in their bones, they would think it all right." She snorted and rapped the spoon on the edge of the kettle. He looked back toward Moiraine's hut. If Leya had been hurt, if she were dead, the Aes Sedai would not simply have gone back inside. The sense of waiting was still there. Whatever it is, it hasn't happened yet. "Min, maybe you'd better go. First thing in the morning. I have some silver I can let you have. And I'm sure Moiraine would give you enough to take passage with a merchant's train out of Gildan. You could be back in Baerlon before you know it." She looked at him until he began to wonder if he had said something wrong. Finally, she said, "That is very sweet of you, Perrin. But, no. I thought you wanted to go. You're always carrying on about having to stay here. I knew an old Illianer woman. Once," she said slowly. "When she was young, her mother arranged a marriage for her with a man she had never even met. They do that down in Ilion sometimes. She said she spent the first 5 years raging against him, and the next 5 scheming to make his life miserable without his knowing who was to blame. It was only years later, she said, when he died, that she realized he really had been the love of her life." "I don't see what that has to do with this." Her look said he obviously was not trying to understand, and her voice became overly patient. "Just because fate has chosen something for you instead of you choosing it for yourself, doesn't mean it has to be bad. Even if it's something you are sure you would never have chosen in 100 years. Better 10 days of love than years of regretting," she quoted. "I understand that even less," he told her. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. She hung the spoon on a tall forked stick stuck in the ground, then surprised him by rising on tiptoe to kiss his cheek. You are a very nice man, Perrin Ibarra, even if you don't understand anything. Perrin blinked at her uncertainly. He wished that he could be certain Rand was in his right mind, or that Matt were there. He was never sure of his ground with girls, but Rand always seemed to know his way. So did Matt. Most of the girls back home in Amon's field had sniffed that Matt would never grow up, but he had seemed to have a way with them. What about you, Perrin? Don't you ever want to go home? All the time, he said fervently. But I do not think I can. Not yet. He looked off toward Ransvale. We are tied together, it seems, aren't we, Rand? Maybe not ever. He thought he had said that too softly for her to hear. But the look she gave him was full of sympathy and agreement. His ears caught faint footsteps behind him, and he looked back up toward Moiraine's hut. Two shapes were making their way down through the deepening twilight. One a woman, slender and graceful even on the rough, slanting ground. The man, head and shoulders taller than his companion, turned off toward where the Shinarans were working. Even to Perrin's eyes he was indistinct, sometimes seeming to vanish altogether, then reappear in mid-stride, parts of him fading into the night and fading back as the wind gusted. Only a warder's shifting cloak could do that, which made the larger figure land, just as the smaller was certainly Moiraine. While behind them, another shape, even dimmer, slipped between the trees. Rand, Perrin thought, going back to his hut. Another night when he won't eat, because he can't stand the way everybody looks at him. You must have eyes in the back of your head, Min said, frowning toward the approaching woman. Or else the sharpest ears I have ever heard of. Is that Moiraine? Careless. He had grown so used to the Shinarans knowing how well he could see, in daylight at least. They did not know about the night, that he was beginning to slip about other things. Carelessness might kill me yet. Is the Tuatha'an woman all right? Min asked as Moiraine came to the fire. She is resting. The Aes Sedai's low voice had its usual musical quality, as if speaking were halfway to singing, and her hair and clothes were back in perfect order again. She rubbed her hands over the fire. There was a golden ring on her left hand, a serpent biting its own tail. The great serpent, an even older symbol for eternity than the wheel of time. Every woman trained in Tar Valon wore such a ring. For a moment, Moiraine's gaze rested on Perrin, and seemed to penetrate too deeply. She fell and split her scalp when Rand. Her mouth tightened, but in the next instant, her face was utter calm again. I healed her, and she is sleeping. There is always a good deal of blood with even a minor scalp wound. But it was not serious. Did you see anything about her, Min? Min looked uncertain. I thought I saw her death. Her own face all over blood. I was sure I knew what it meant. But if she split her scalp... Are you sure she is all right? It was a measure of her discomfort that she asked. And Aes Sedai did not heal, and leave anything wrong that could be healed. And Moiraine's talents were particularly strong in that area. Min sounded so troubled that Perrin was surprised for a moment. Then he nodded to himself. She did not really like doing what she did, but it was a part of her. She thought she knew how it worked, or some of it at least. If she was wrong, it would almost be like finding out she did not know how to use her own hands. Moiraine considered her for a moment, serene and dispassionate. You have never been wrong in any reading for me, not one about which I had any way of knowing. Perhaps this is the first time. When I know, Min whispered obstinately. Light help me, I do. Or perhaps it is yet to come. She has a long way yet to travel, to return to her wagons, and she must ride through unsettled lands. The Aes Sedai's voice was a cool song, uncaring. Perrin made an involuntary sound in his throat. Light, did I sound like that? I won't let a death matter that little to me. As if he had spoken aloud. Moiraine looked at him. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, Perrin. I told you long ago that we were in a war. We cannot stop just because some of us may die. Any of us may die before it is done. Leia's weapons may not be the same as yours, but she knew that when she became part of it. Perrin dropped his eyes. That's as may be, Aes Sedai, but I will never accept it the way you do. Lan joined them across the fire, with Uno and Loyal. The flames cast flickering shadows across the water's face, making it seem more carved from stone even than it normally did. All hard planes and angles. His cloak was not much easier to look at in the firelight. Sometimes it seemed only a dark gray cloak, or black, but the gray and black appeared to crawl and change if you looked too closely. Shades and shadows sliding across it, soaking into it. Other times it looked as if Lan had somehow made a hole in the night and pulled darkness around his shoulders. Not at all an easy thing to watch, and not made any easier by the man who wore it. Lan was tall and hard, broad-shouldered, with blue eyes like frozen mountain lakes, and he moved with a deadly grace that made the sword on his hip seem a part of him. It was not that he seemed merely capable of violence and death. This man had tamed violence and death and kept them in his pocket, ready to be loosed in a heartbeat, or embraced, should Moiraine give the word. Beside Lan, even Uno appeared less dangerous. There was a touch of gray in the warder's long hair, held back by a woven leather cord around his forehead. But younger men stepped back from confronting Lan, if they were wise. Mistress Leya has the usual news from Almoth Plain, Moiraine said. Everyone fighting everyone else, villages burned, people fleeing in every direction, and hunters have appeared on the plain, searching for the Horn of Valere. Perrin shifted. The horn was where no hunter on Almoth Plain would find it, where he hoped no hunter ever would find it, and she gave him a cool look before continuing. She did not like any of them to speak of the horn, except when she chose to, of course. She brought different news as well. The Whitecloaks have perhaps 5,000 men on Almoth Plain. Uno grunted. That's Flamen. Pardon. Aes Sedai. That must be half their strength. They've never committed so much to one place before. Then I suppose all those who declared for Rand are dead or scattered, Perrin muttered. Or they soon will be. You were right, Moiraine. He did not like the thought of Whitecloaks. He did not like the Children of the Light at all. That is what is odd, Moiraine said. Or the first part of it. The children have announced that their purpose is to bring peace, which is not unusual for them. What is unusual is that while they are trying to force the Taraboners and the Domani back across their respective borders, they have not moved in any force against those who have declared for the dragon. Min gave an exclamation of surprise. Is she certain? That does not sound like any Whitecloaks I ever heard of. There can't be many blood. Many tinkers left on the plain, Uno said. His voice creaked from the strain of watching his language in front of an Aes Sedai. His real eye matched the frown of the painted one. They don't like to stay where there's any kind of trouble, especially fighting. There can't be enough of them to see everywhere. There are enough for my purposes, Moiraine said firmly. Most have gone, but some few remain because I asked them to. And Leya is quite certain. Oh, the children have snapped up some of the Dragonsworn, where there were only a handful gathered. But though they proclaim they will bring down this false dragon, though they have 1,000 men supposedly doing nothing but hunting him, they avoid contact with any party of as many as 50 Dragonsworn. Not openly, you understand, but there is always some delay. Then Rand can go down to them as he wants. Loyal blinked uncertainly at the Aes Sedai. The whole camp knew of her arguments with Rand. The wheel weaves away for him. Uno and Lan opened their mouths at the same time, but the Shinaran gave way with a small bow. More likely, the warder said. It is some Whitecloak plot, though the light burn me if I can see what it is. But when the Whitecloaks give me a gift, I search for the poison needle hidden in it. Uno nodded grimly. Besides which, Lan added, the Domani and the Taraboners are still trying as hard to kill the Dragonsworn as they are to kill each other. And there is another thing, Moiraine said. 3 young men have died in villages Mistress Leia's wagons passed near. Perrin noticed a flicker of Lan's eyelid. For the warder, it was as much a sign of surprise as a shout from another man. Lan had not expected her to tell this. Moiraine went on. 1 died by poison, 2 by the knife. Each in circumstances where no one should have been able to come close unseen. But that is how it happened. She peered into the flames. All three young men were taller than most, and had light-colored eyes. Light eyes are uncommon on Almoth Plain, but I think it is very unlucky right now to be a tall young man with light eyes there. How? Perrin asked. How could they be killed if no one could get close to them? The Dark One has killers you don't notice until it is too late, Lan said quietly. Uno gave a shiver. The Soulless. I never heard of one south of the Borderlands before. Enough of such talk, Moiraine said firmly. Perrin had questions. What in the light are the Soulless? Are they like a Trolloc or a Fade? What? But he left them unasked. When Moiraine decided enough had been said about something, she would not talk of it anymore. And when she shut her mouth, you could not pry lands open with an iron bar. The Shinarans followed her lead too. No one wanted to anger an Aes Sedai. Light, Min muttered, uneasily eyeing the deepening darkness around them. You don't notice them. Light. So nothing has changed. Perrin said glumly. Not really. We cannot go down to the plain, and the Dark One wants us dead. Everything changes, Moiraine said calmly, and the pattern takes it all in. We must ride on the pattern, not on the changes of a moment. She looked at them each in turn, then said, Uno, are you certain your scouts missed nothing suspicious? Even something small? The Lord Dragon's rebirth has loosed the bonds of certainty, Moiraine Sedai. And there is never certainty if you fight Myrtle. But I will stake my life that the scouts did as good a job as any warder. It was one of the longest speeches Perrin had ever heard out of Uno without any curses. There was sweat on the man's forehead from the effort. We all may, Moiraine said. What Rand might as well have been a fire on the mountaintop for any Murdraw within 10 miles. Maybe. Min began hesitantly. Maybe you ought to set wards that will keep them out. Lan gave her a hard stare. He sometimes questioned Moiraine's decisions himself, though he seldom did so where anyone could overhear, but he did not approve of others doing the same. Min frowned right back at him. Well, Myrdraw and Trollocs are bad enough, but at least I can see them. I don't like the idea that one of these Soulless might sneak in here and slit my throat before I even noticed him. The wards I set will hide us from the Soulless, as well as from any other shadow spawn, Moiraine said. When you are weak as we are, the best choice is often to hide. If there is a halfman close enough to have, well, to set wards that would kill them if they tried to enter camp is beyond my abilities. And even if I could, such a warding would only pin us here. Since it is not possible to set two kinds of warding at once, I leave the scouts and the guard. I could make a circuit around the camp, Lan said. If there is anything out there that the scouts missed, I will find it. It was not a boast, just a statement of fact. Uno even nodded agreement. Moiraine shook her head. If you are needed tonight, my Gaiden, it will be here. Her gaze rose toward the dark mountains around them. There is a feeling in the air. Waiting. The word left Perrin's tongue before he could stop it. When Moiraine looked at him, into him, he wished he had it back. Yes, she said. Waiting. Make sure your guards are especially alert tonight, Ono. There was no need to suggest that the men sleep with their weapons close at hand. Shinarans always did that. Sleep well, she added to them all, as if there were any chance of that now, and started back for her hut. Lan stayed long enough to spoon up 3 dishes of stew, then hurried after her, quickly swallowed by the night. Perrin's eyes shone golden as they followed the warder through the darkness. Sleep well, he muttered. The smell of cooked meat suddenly made him queasy. I have the 3rd watch, you know. The Shinaran nodded. Then I will try to take her advice. Others were coming to the fires, and murmurs of conversation followed him up the slope. He had a hut to himself, a small thing of logs barely tall enough to stand in, the chinks filled with dried mud. A rough bed, padded with pine boughs beneath a blanket, took up nearly half of it. Whoever had unsaddled his horse had also propped his bow just inside the door. He hung up his belt, with axe and quiver, on a peg, then stripped down to his small clothes, shivering. The nights were cold still, but cold kept him from sleeping too deeply. In deep sleep, dreams came that he could not shake off. For a time, with a single blanket over him, he lay staring at the log roof, shivering. Then sleep came, and with it, dreams. Cold filled the common room of the inn despite the fire blazing on the long stone hearth. Perrin rubbed his hands before the flames, but he could get no warmth in them. There was an odd comfort in the cold, though, as if it were a shield. A shield against what? He could not think. Something murmured in the back of his mind. A dim sound only vaguely heard, scratching to get in. So you will give it up then? It is the best thing for you. Come, sit, and we will talk. Perrin turned to look at the speaker. The round tables scattered about the room were empty, except for the lone man seated in a corner. In the shadows, the rest of the room seemed in some way hazy, almost an impression rather than a place, especially anything he was not looking at directly. He glanced back at the fire. It burned on a brick hearth now. Somehow, none of it bothered him. It should, but he could not have said why. The man beckoned, and Perrin walked closer to his table. A square table. The tables were square. Frowning, he reached out to finger the tabletop, but pulled his hand back. There were no lamps in that corner of the room, and despite the light elsewhere, the man and his table were almost hidden, nearly blended with the dimness. Perrin had a feeling that he knew the man, but it was as vague as what he saw out of the corner of his eye. The fellow was in his middle years, handsome, and too well dressed for a country inn, in dark, nearly black, velvets with white lace folds at his collar and cuffs. He sat stiffly, sometimes pressing a hand to his chest, as if moving hurt him. His dark eyes were fixed on Perrin's face. They appeared like glistening points in the shadows. Give up what? Perrin asked. That, of course. The man nodded to the axe at Perrin's waist. He sounded surprised, as if it were a conversation they had had before, an old argument taken up again. Perrin had not realized the axe was there, had not felt the weight of it pulling at his belt. He ran a hand over the half-moon blade and the thick spike that balanced it. The steel felt solid, more solid than anything else there, maybe even more solid than he was himself. He kept his hand there, to hold on to something real. I have thought of it, he said, but I do not think I can. Not yet. Not yet. The inn seemed to flicker, and the murmur sounded again in his head. No. The murmur faded. No? The man smiled, a cold smile. You are a blacksmith, boy, and a good one from what I hear. Your hands were made for a hammer, not an axe. Made to make things, not to kill. Go back to that before it is too late. Perrin found himself nodding. Yes, but I'm Tavern. He had never said that out loud before, but he knows it already. He was sure of that, though he could not say why. For an instant, the man's smile became a grimace, but then it returned in more strength than before. A cold strength. There are ways to change things, boy. Ways to avoid even fate. Sit, and we will talk of them. The shadows appeared to shift and thicken, to reach out. Perrin took a step back, keeping well in the light. I don't think so. At least have a drink with me. To years past and years to come. Here you will see things more clearly after. The cup the man pushed across the table had not been there a moment before. It shone bright silver, and dark, blood-red wine filled it to the brim. Perrin peered at the man's face. Even to his sharp eyes, the shadows seemed to shroud the other man's features like a warder's cloak. Darkness molded the man like a caress. There was something about the man's eyes, something he thought he could remember if he tried hard enough. The murmur returned. No, he said. He spoke to the soft sound inside his head. But when the man's mouth tightened in anger, a flash of rage suppressed as soon as begun, he decided it would do for the wine as well. I am not thirsty. He turned and started for the door. The fireplace was rounded river stones. A few long tables lined by benches filled the room. He suddenly wanted to be outside, anywhere away from this man. You will not have many chances, the man said behind him in a hard voice. 3 threads woven together share one another's doom. When one is cut, all are. Fate can kill you, if it does not do worse. Perrin felt a sudden heat against his back, rising then fading just as quickly, as if the doors of a huge smelting furnace had swung open and closed again. Startled, he turned back to the room. It was empty. Only a dream, he thought, shivering from the cold. And with that, everything shifted. He stared into the mirror, a part of him not comprehending what he saw, another part accepting. A gilded helmet, worked like a lion's head, sat on his head as if it belonged there. Gold leaf covered his ornately hammered breastplate, and goldwork embellished the plate and mail on his arms and legs. Only the axe at his side was plain. A voice, his own, whispered in his mind that he would take it over any other weapon, had carried it 1,000 times, in 100 battles. No! He wanted to take it off, throw it away. I can't! There was a sound in his head, louder than a murmur, almost at the level of understanding. A man destined for glory. He spun away from the mirror and found himself staring at the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He noticed nothing else about the room, cared to see nothing but her. Her eyes were pools of midnight, her skin creamy pale, and surely softer, more smooth than her dress of white silk. When she moved toward him, his mouth went dry. He realized that every other woman he had ever seen was clumsy and ill-shaped. He shivered and wondered why he felt cold. A man should grasp his destiny with both hands, she said, smiling. It was almost enough to warm him. That smile. She was tall, less than a hand short of being able to look him in the eyes. Silver combs held hair darker than a raven's wing. A broad belt of silver links banded a waist he could have encircled with his hands. Yes, he whispered. Inside him, startlement fought with acceptance. He had no use for glory, but when she said it, he wanted nothing else. The murmuring sound dug at his skull. No, it was gone, and for a moment, so was acceptance. Almost. He put a hand to his head, touched the golden helmet, took it off. I don't think I want this. It is not mine. Don't want it. She laughed. What man with blood in his veins would not want glory? As much glory as if you had sounded the horn of Valera. I don't, he said, though a piece of him shouted that he lied. The horn of Valera. The horn rang out, and the wild charge began. Death rode at his shoulder, and yet she waited ahead too. His lover, his destroyer. No, I am a blacksmith. Her smile was pitying. Such a little thing to want. You must not listen to those who would try to turn you from your destiny. They would demean you, debase you, destroy you. Fighting fate can only bring pain. Why choose pain when you can have glory? When your name can be remembered alongside all the heroes of legend. I am no hero. You don't know the half of what you are, of what you can be. Come, share a cup with me, to destiny and glory. There was a shining silver cup in her hand, filled with blood-red wine. Drink. Then he stared at the cup, frowning. There was something familiar about it. A growling chewed at his brain. No! He fought away from it, refusing to listen. No! She held out the golden cup to him. Drink. But golden? I thought the cup was. It was. The rest of the thought would not come. But in his confusion, the sound came again. Inside, gnawing, demanding to be heard. No, he said. No! He looked at the golden helmet in his hands, and threw it aside. I am a blacksmith. I am. The sound within his head fought him, struggling toward being heard. He wrapped his arms around his head to shut it out, and only shut it in. Shouted. Darkness enfolded him, but her voice followed, whispering, The night is always there, and dreams come to all men. Especially you, my wildling. And I will always be in your dreams. Stillness. He lowered his arms. He was back in his own coat and breeches again, sturdy and well-made if plain. Suitable garb for a blacksmith, or any countryman. Yet he barely noticed them. He stood on a low-railed bridge of stone, arching from one wide, flat-topped stone spire to another. Spires that rose from depths too far for even his eyes to penetrate. The light would have been dim to any other eyes, and he could not make out from where it came. It just was. Everywhere he looked, left and right, up or down, were more bridges, more spires, and railless ramps. There seemed no end to them, no pattern. Worse, some of those ramps climbed to spire tops that had to be directly above the ones they had left. Splashing water echoed, the sound seeming to come from everywhere at once. He shivered with cold. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he caught a motion, and without thinking, he crouched behind the stone railing. There was danger in being seen. He did not know why, but he knew it was true. He just knew. Cautiously peering over the top of the rail, he sought what he had seen moving. A flash of white flickered on a distant ramp. A woman, he was sure, though he could not quite make her out. A woman in a white dress hurrying somewhere. On a bridge slightly below him, and much closer than the ramp where the woman had been, a man suddenly appeared, tall and dark and slender, the silver in his black hair giving him a distinguished look. His dark green coat thickly embroidered with golden leaves. Gold work covered his belt and pouch, and gems sparkled on his dagger sheath, and golden fringe encircled his boot tops. Where had he come from? Another man started across the bridge from the other side, his appearance as sudden as the first man's. Black stripes ran down the puffy sleeves of his red coat, and pale lace hung thick at his collar and cuffs. His boots were so worked with silver that it was hard to see the leather. He was shorter than the man he went to meet, more stocky, with close-cropped hair as white as his lace. Age did not make him frail, though. He strode with the same arrogant strength the other man showed. The two of them approached each other warily, like two horse traders who know the other fellow has a spavined mare to sell, Perrin thought. The men began to talk. Perrin strained his ears, but he could not hear so much as a murmur above the splashing echoes. Frowns and glares and sharp motions as if half on the point of striking. They did not trust one another. He thought they might even hate each other. He glanced up, searching for the woman. But she was gone. When he looked back down, another man had joined the first two. And somehow, from somewhere, Perrin knew him with the vagueness of an old memory. A handsome man in his middle years, wearing nearly black velvet and white lace. An inn, Perrin thought. And something before that. Something a long time ago, it seemed. But the memory would not come. The first two men stood side by side, now, made uncomfortable allies by the presence of the newcomer. He shouted at them and shook his fist, while they shifted uneasily, refusing to meet his glares. If the two hated each other, they feared him more. His eyes, Perrin thought. What is strange about his eyes? The tall, dark man began to argue back, slowly at first, then with increasing fervor. The white-haired man joined in, and suddenly their temporary alliance broke. All three shouted at once, each at both of the others in turn. Abruptly, the man in dark velvets threw his arms wide, as if demanding an end to it, and an expanding ball of fire enveloped them, hid them, spreading out and out. Perrin threw his arms around his head and dropped behind the stone railing, huddling there as wind buffeted him and tore at his clothes. A wind as hot as fire. A wind that was fire. Even with his eyes shut, he could see it. Flame billowing across everything. Flame blowing through everything. The fiery gale roared through him too. He could feel it, burning, tugging, trying to consume him and scatter the ashes. He yelled, trying to hang on to himself, knowing it was not enough. And between one heartbeat and the next, the wind was gone. There was no diminishing. One instant, a storm of flame pummeled him. The next, utter stillness. The echoes of falling water were the only sound. Slowly, Perrin sat up, examining himself. His clothes were unsinged and whole, his exposed skin unburned. Only the memory of heat made him believe it had happened. A memory in the mind alone. His body felt no memory of it. Cautiously, he peeked over the railing. Only a few paces of half-melted footing at either end remained of the bridge where the men had been standing. Of them there was no sign. A prickling in the hair on the back of his neck made him look up. On a ramp above him and to the right, a shaggy gray wolf stood looking at him. No! He scrambled to his feet and ran. This is a dream. A nightmare. I want to wake up. He ran, and his vision blurred. The blur shifted. A buzzing filled his ears, then faded. And as it went, the shimmering in his eyes steadied. He shivered with the cold and knew this for a dream. Certain and sure, from the first moment. He was dimly aware of some shadowy memory of dreams preceding this. But this one he knew. He had been in this place before, on previous nights, and if he understood nothing of it, he still knew it for a dream. For once, knowing changed nothing. Huge columns of polished redstone surrounded the open space where he stood, beneath a domed ceiling 50 paces or more above his head. He and another man as big could not have encircled one of those columns with their arms. The floor was paved with great slabs of pale gray stone, hard yet worn by countless generations of feet. And centered beneath the dome was the reason why all those feet had come to this chamber. A sword hanging hilt down in the air, apparently without support, seemingly where anyone could reach out and take it. It revolved slowly, as if some breath of air caught it. Yet it was not really a sword. It seemed made of glass, or perhaps crystal, blade and hilt and crossguard, catching such light as there was, and shattering it into 1,000 glitters and flash. He walked toward it and put out his hand, as he had done each time before. He clearly remembered doing it. The hilt hung there in front of his face within easy reach. A foot from the shining sword, his hand splayed out against empty air as if it had touched stone, as he had known it would. He pushed harder, but he might as well have been shoving against a wall. The sword turned and sparkled, a foot away, and as far out of reach as if on the other side of an ocean. Kalendor. He was not certain whether the whisper came inside his head or out. It seemed to echo around the columns, as soft as the wind, everywhere at once, insistent. Kalendor. Who wields me, wields destiny. Take me, and begin the final journey. He took a step back, suddenly frightened. That whisper had never come before. 4 times before he had had this dream. He could remember that even now. 4 nights, one after the other. And this was the first time anything had changed in it. The Twisted Ones come. It was a different whisper, from a source he knew, and he jumped as if a murdral had touched him. A wolf stood there among the columns, a mountain wolf, almost waist-high and shaggy white and gray. It stared at him intently with eyes as yellow as his own. No, Perrin rasped. No, I will not let you in. I will not. He clawed his way awake and sat up in his hut, shaking with fear and cold and anger. I will not, he whispered hoarsely. The thought was clear in his head, but the thought was not his own. The Twisted Ones come, brother.